Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the May 8th Environmental Matters Committee meeting. We'll do roll call. Alderman Arnett, Alderwoman Finlayson.
Present.
And is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So move.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. We have approval of the minutes from April 10th.
Move approval of the minutes from the April 10th meeting.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Legislation. Let's see. So we have transit development plan, and then we have. Where are the time limits? Anybody? We have two pieces of legislation, and then we have some IDs. All right. So, Mr. Moore, Director Moore, are you ready to start? We have R1725, which is 2025 Transit Development Plan, City of Annapolis. And fortunately, we just had a long conversation about this yesterday, so you're spared from lots of my questions. But do you want to give a presentation or anything to us?
Yeah, I don't have, good afternoon, everyone. Marcus Moore, Director of Transportation and Parking. I don't have the total presentation posted and all, but I can give you updates on where we are and what it's all about. This particular plan is done every 5 years for our funding sources. It's like a roadmap to take a look at where we are and where we like to go as far as making changes. The last transit development plan that was presented to the council was back in 2019, and some of the ideas that were put forth in it have been adopted this year, one being the microtransit on-demand service, which is still in its infancy. It's a pilot program for another 2 years that we started back in July 15th of last year, and it continues to grow as we figure out how we can best utilize that. So part of the plan, the TDP that we have, is looking at how we look at zones within the city, how we can better serve the city with what we have right now. So some of the things that we're coming up with are the senior centers and how we can look at a better line going directly to the high school, which is actually in the county. There is service to the high school currently with the county's route that we used to operate, the yellow route, but there may be a better way of making that for our neighborhoods getting into the high school without changing at the mall, because that's the only way you're getting there now, as before when we ran it back in 2018. So the roadmap that has been sent, I can send it again to you, an abridged version of it with the highlights, the key points as well, and we can extrapolate from that report that has been presented on first reader back on the 14th to the City Council. And as Alderman Savage mentioned, we had a full presentation from the planners that put it together, KFH, yesterday, with a very lively discussion. So we're going to answer some of the questions that came up from yesterday's conversation on it, and we can get that information back to all the committees that want it, specifically ATC, the Transportation Committee, and of course the Environmental Matters, and whomever else would like to see what we're looking at. One of the cautionary points of it, this has been going on for about 8 months as far as the meetings with stakeholders, shareholders, residents that don't ride, that could ride, our own employees, our drivers, and looking at, like I said, the health of the system and what are some viable options that we could make that make sense. Some of them are cost neutral, but many do come with a cost, which will add a bus on a route. Some of our guidelines are to try to keep a headway, and that's how long it takes a route to make a complete trip, under 30 minutes, or from one end to the other before it turns back. The guide there is about 30 minutes, where after that it becomes unattractive. And one of the things you'll find in most transit systems of a city of our size, not a metropolis like New York City, LA, Chicago, where having a car is a big luxury. Here, we're catching more of the folks that don't have those means, but we like to get those that do have those means as being a viable option. And what does that mean? It's the frequency of operation and how we get from A to B safely, efficiently, and effectively to make better use of their time without having to drive. But I can answer some of the questions that you might have. But like I said, KFH made the presentation for us yesterday, and they're going to come back with some of the questions, answer some of the questions that were brought up at our meeting, ATC yesterday.
Mr. Chair, I'm surprised the presentation is up because I thought Josh was here because it's on our on our iPad. So we do have your presentation, the entire 100.
The report.
Yeah.
Oh, no, there was actually a presentation deck of about 12 or 14 pages that kind of KFH went through that was loaded at yesterday's meeting.
Yeah, we don't have that. We have the full
The whole
draft
book,
plan.
yeah. And what the other one was pretty much pulling out the highlights of the plan and how it was arranged when we first met back in June of last year, and the progression throughout, and some of the comments and the things that were heard through, we had it up for public comment on our website for 30 days, and our face-to-face meetings that we had actually at our location. I think it was 4 or 5 meetings over the last 6 months, and grabbing what people actually brought to our attention of what they want to see in an Annapolis transit plan, things that they want to see that would require a change. How are we doing? What can we do better? What would you like to see? What's preventing you from writing? Why are you writing? Do you have a choice? And that's kind of the things that we've been going through over, the last 9 months. They prefaced it also with, when you get government funds, each within the state of Maryland anyway, I'm sure it might be nationwide, you're required to have this kind of a health of your system done, a transit development plan performed. Our neighbors, Anne Arundel County, has done that, and they completed theirs probably a few months before us. I want to say the fall of last year. And we went through similar thoughts of how their service could be better. We also have regular meetings with the county and how we can help them with what they're trying to do with micro transit on-demand service, because they've seen what we've done and like what we've done, and how can they be a part of that. So we've been in conversation with the director, the chief officer of transportation in the county, to see how we can better serve them. We have more of the infrastructure to do that with the drivers, the location, the buses. A lot of theirs is outsourced to another party to operate their service. So we kind of the experts and kind of leading edge with them and some of the things that we're doing.
The director, do you want us to bring? We might be able to bring up the presentation from yesterday if you wanted us.
We can probably go through it if we like. Yeah, we can. I didn't present yesterday, help me answer the questions, but at least we can share what we had. That would be good.
If you want, let me just see. Is that committee have interest in that, or
Yeah,
you want to see the presentation from yesterday?
I would, but I also have a couple of global questions to ask. But yeah, because this is a lot of information to.
Well, we might as well wait until the presentation because that might answer some of your questions. Do you want to? We could push you down the agenda if you want while we wait.
Well,
Oh, he has it?
Yeah, you can put it
bring it
up.
up now? Oh, okay.
yeah,
Okay.
we'll let Ross ask the
Okay.
question.
You want to start?
Josh has say slide. Josh,
He's gonna
running
run it
Oh,
from the
okay.
studio.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, Ross, you want to get started?
Well, my two overarching questions are, as you pointed out in your presentation to the Budget Committee, we actually have 2 transit systems, and I think we only need one, and I really do think it needs to be a regional transit system. So I'll look forward to seeing what you discuss in this report regarding that. But the other thing that I'll be looking for is how your transportation plan integrates with the comprehensive, and in particular, which comes first, the chicken and the egg? Does good transit system beget good new development, and therefore seems like it needs to precede any of the move to the comprehensive plan? So those are going to be overriding. I don't I don't know whether we have a choice or not to pass the resolution, because the resolution says we accept the report, unless we're planning to send you back and rewrite the report. But I do think that these two big questions are of grave importance in terms of transit itself, in terms of planning, and in terms of budget. So those are what I want to hear about.
Yeah, one of the things, good question, Alderman Arnett. The transit plan, the TDP, is a grant-funded plan where it was adopted last year. Well, for this fiscal FY25, it was a part of our budget for our local share. The comprehensive 2040 plan is all city-funded and more of a, obviously, a longer-term 2040. Our transit plan is a 5-year roadmap of things that we could do, recommendations from those stakeholders and shareholders that were a part of this, or, well, I should say a part of it in person, or just writing into us, and the transportation planners were putting their notes a part of it, and then kind of weighing through what we could do, what makes sense. And so you're voting on the TDP as a roadmap of things that we might do. And as I keep going back to the 2019, there was a lot of things there that was a possibility, and one being fare free. And things like that will cost money. So what do you do to make up the deficit if you decide to go fare free with all of our transit services? We'll need more money coming out of maybe the parking fund or other general funds to fund it. There's a statement out there that thinks that, well, there's not a lot of money coming in for fares, and it should be easily to make up. But one of the things is that we do get, organizational paid fares on the side that equals to what we have. So you might just think the 320 to 330,000 is it. It's more like, the 600 plus. And then we do get subsidies from the county because we go into the county. So certain things would still be in play, most likely from the county. But any organizational paid fares, like from DGS with the state shuttle, or those organizations that buy monthly or daily passes, I should say, for like the Lighthouse Shelter, the detention center, Arundel Lodge. There's a list of about 7 or 8 that adds to about 15,000, and the DGS is about 265,000. You add that all in. So those are things to take in consideration to go with a system like that. Well, how much does it cost you to collect fares? In some smaller agencies, that may be a big question, but we have the infrastructure for the last 7 or 8 years with electronic fare box. So it basically counts and says what we should have. We bag it up, and Brinks comes to take it to Wells Fargo. There's not a whole lot. We're not counting money on the side of our building to do that deposit. So sometimes it may look at, well, how much does it cost you to prepare this to go, to make the deposit come back into the general fund of the city? That's a decision that legislators like yourself would have to make. What makes sense? Who is writing? Will that increase ridership? I want to say yes. Will it increase new ridership? Maybe in some. Will increase those that were riding before to ride more? Definitely. So, you want to look at more of a robust system, but going to places that we didn't go before. So part of what we look at with the transit development plan and other things that we're tweaking are making recommendations with microtransit, which is a really big thing. We can move on to, who is it? Next slide that we can go to. So when we look at it here, what are we building on? What are our objectives? And what are we trying to do when we actually put this plan, this 5-year short-range plan together, as I made mention of the comprehensive 2040 plan, which obviously is going out to 2040 and probably beyond. So we build upon the formulas and goals and objectives from what we already have, and we'll review what our current transit system looks like and make some adjustments, because we all know that we have some unmet needs. And when you have to get certain things from a store, that was better than a CVS or a Walgreens, you might call yourself a food desert in some places of Eastport. So, making a system that can get you to a Grawls, a Giant, a Safeway into the mall, we have some unmet needs. Does it make sense to operate a bus every 15, 30 minutes or 45 minutes, or basically the on-demand? So we want to, take a look at, well, this plan did take a look at these factors and wanted to see what our traveling public actually thought along the way. Next slide, please. So the process, as you can see here, what we did was a kickoff initiating the plan. That was back in June of 2014. And like I said, KFH planners were assisting us with organizing it and setting up the questionnaires and say how they will function as a unit. Stakeholders, shareholders, residents, current riders, and the like. So the baseline is looking at the existing system, Annapolis Transit as it is today, and looking at the demographics and land use. And a lot of the places like Annapolis Town Center, where you have that kind of a land use where it is residential and shops and all, those are big places that you can definitely make sure that you're servicing. In the community at large, what are the issues and opportunities? We're trying to get to school, work, pleasure, play, medical appointment, and all. So when you look at the system, what are we looking at for operational capital investments into the system to operate with what we already have, or needing more, staffing buses or build outs for safety bus stops. So when you look at safe routes to transit and the like, the final stage is where we are now, is developing that plan. And that came to fruition probably in February, and then was put out again, like I said, on our website for public comment for about 30 days or so. Next slide, please. So the public participation and community outlets look, you can kind of see in the top left is what the actual plan, the actual survey looked like. And this is what a snapshot of what it looked like actually online. So our public advisory committee, the transportation committee, the transportation board, all the surveys that you can see here from, with the rider survey, we actually put them on board the bus where the driver would hand them out and bring them back in, and we would get them back to KFH, our transportation planners, to review them. The operations and driver input was very, very big, because what do they see? What do they hear? That is their office. That is their job. So they're there every day. They would basically know what more of what we would like to know or learn more about. And then the public comment period was about 30 days, like I mentioned, online, but out in the field was probably a little bit more than that. Next slide, please. So the summary of the needs assessment is what we want, what people, current riders, are saying, and basically what we knew, the morning, evening, and Saturday service. So obviously the morning, evening is going to work, going to school, getting back, and Saturday we're running our chores, but also in there we have other appointments that we need. What does the Sunday service look like? Where are we going? Right now we're operating 8 until 8 p.m. We want more frequent service, and as we may mention, if we can keep those headways below 30 minutes, it makes it pretty viable. And if I can stop here, just talk a little bit about our Go Time, our on-demand service. One of the things that we did was look at the frequency of service. The purple route and orange route were the two most underutilized routes that we have, and the orange route was Monday through Friday from 5 until 7, 5:30 to 7, and the purple picked up at night and all day Sundays and holidays. That purple route covered almost our complete service area. So a headway there going from the mall towards Turnaround Point in Eastport was about 1 hour and 20 minutes. Unbearable. But if that's the only show in town, that's what anyone that needed a ride home, that's what they did. So what we did with the microtransit, which was, like I said, the recommendation from 2019, we are piloting a service called Go Time On Demand Service to try to fix this. And in the first few months, it equaled the service, and right now it's single digits more than what we were carrying before. So it addressed that frequency of operation. And what it actually is, you can take a look at your. We've updated on our phones our Google phone or our Google in Play Store. You'll be able to look at the Transigo app and actually make a reservation yourself, or you can actually call our office and make that reservation. And our success is if once you made the reservation, if we can get you in 20 minutes or less. And for the most part, we are getting between 15 and 22 minutes of the time the reservation is made. If I can use the purple again, remember starting at the mall, going all the way to Eastport, making some 28 stops, it's going to take an hour and 20 minutes. Somebody now going from the mall to the same point, it's a shared ride, so making stops along the way, it wouldn't be every single stop that the purple would make. It's doing it in less than half the time. And that's probably some of the success of Go Time, that it's going when you want to go, not when the route is operating. And what we have is some of our regular stops, and we have virtual stops. So even though it's a watered down version of Uber or Lyft, you put your location finder on and it says, I want to book a ride, and it'll tell you how close the nearest stop to where you would be picked up, and you're putting your location. So if you said something like 308 Chickapin Round Road, which is a place I go to regularly, and I put 160 Duke of Gloucester, it may have the bus stop right in front of me, and it'll tell me, a bus may be around in 7 or 8 minutes. Please wait at this point, and you can actually follow the bus along the way. So 2 more years of this 3-year pilot, we can see how we can expand it. But one of the things you'll see in future slides of breaking it down into regions, region 1, 2, and 3. 1 being more in the eastern part, Annapolis Neck or Ward 7, and 3 being kind of out of the county, out of the city into the county, when you're looking at the hospital, parole, the mall, and the high school. So we're tweaking those things, but we'll take a closer look at it in the other maps that'll be coming up. So those are the key destinations that we're really looking at when you look at these maps that are coming in next that we'll share with you. Can I get to the next slide? I'm sorry.
I think we have a question from Alderman Arnett.
Yes, I'm sorry.
So when Go Annapolis comes in response to an on-demand, what is coming? Is it a bus? Is it a vehicle like a Lyft or an Uber?
Yeah, it is one of our shorter buses, which is called a Cutaway Ford E450 bus that is handicap accessible. It can have, right now, the ones we have are 15-seaters. We just ordered some newer ones that are 8-seater. It is a bus, and we have head signs that are dynamic, and it will say Go Time right on the front. Just like you see our buses now that says Brown A, Brown B, or Magenta Shuttle on the front or the side. So it'll be identifiable that way. And you're at that location where you are, so you'll be looking for that bus, and they'll be looking for you at that location. So it is a Annapolis Transit marked bus.
So this brings to mind, recently I had a doctor's appointment on West Street, and I saw 2 county buses there, the big, full, looks like a school bus kind of thing. One lady came out and got on one of the buses and left, and a couple came out and got on the other bus and left. That doesn't strike me as a very efficient mode of operation. No, that's the county. But if we're also sending bigger buses on the on-demand, how efficient is that?
Yeah, I can't answer that without having more information. I'm not sure exactly what that is, but we wouldn't be sending anything. We operate 3/4 of a mile within our fixed bus route. So yeah, West Street is within our realm of where we service, but you're saying county buses, what were they doing? How were they doing? Was it Department of Aging? Was it MTA? I can't answer without actually knowing more markings on the bus and what it had, but that doesn't sound like efficiencies, but it wasn't us, so I can't answer for them.
But you said that we send a Cutaway bus, which I admit I don't know what it is, but it sounds like a multi-passenger bus. Is it only picking up the one on-demand customer, or is it gathering and dropping off people along the
See,
way.
that's the beauty of it. It's on demand. So when you call, you could be with 3 or 4 people or one person, depending how far you're going. It's really the on demand, and the algorithms will put the folks on the bus where that actually is. So right now, it being, what time it is, 3:29, we have servicing 3/4 of a mile of the orange route. And the orange route would come here to 160 Duke of Gloucester. But it's, I would have to share a map with you to show where the orange route goes. It's not covering the whole city until after 7 o'clock. But it's kind of hard to answer that scenario you described without having a little bit more information. But clearly was not us, as you described it, as being a county bus. But, Cutaway is just, expect you to know what those look like, but it is an Annapolis Transit bus, not a big transit bus that's also Annapolis Transit. It's the shorter ones that have a hood on the front, where all of our larger transit buses are flat fronts. So I'm not sure what the other one was that you saw, where they were going or what they were doing.
One was aging and one had green on it or something
Yeah.
like that.
So they have their service, go something with a green logo, then Department of Aging. But yeah, that's the county. I really can't answer what they were doing, what was going on, and why they were too nearby.
Thank you.
Where we are. Okay, so some of the proposals that you see in the full transit development plan, like I said, this presentation just extrapolated some high points from it, but streamline the current routes that we have, which are brown, green, and red. Make them a little bit more in line with what we want to do with the population density where we should be going. Implementing a new blue route, just making another color that will separate it from the other routes that you see there, and you'll see some maps of what was actually being presented. That's in the full TDP, and we can explain a little bit more about it. But also proposals was expand the go time, as I just made mention of what it is, in the morning, evening, weekend services of the routes described above. But one of the things, Alderman Allnett, you did bring up, and it looks like it's discussed right here, with the better coordination with Anne Arundel County, the Department of Transportation, MTA, which brings the number 70 bus into Annapolis from Patapsco. That is clearly their longest route, going from Patapsco into the city, and it comes into the city off of Rowell Boulevard, down Calvert Street, and makes that left onto West Street and around the circle and back out St. John's. I don't know the frequency, but I'm sure it's every bit of like an hour and 20 minutes that it comes through daily. But better coordination with these other services that were right in the county, obviously, but MTA of Baltimore is servicing Anne Arundel County and the city of Annapolis. So some of the proposed improvements are listed here, and that last bullet, number 5, or box there, Alderman Arnett, that does look like it will be looking at some of the ways that we can better coordinate economies of scale, because there is an invisible barrier when you look at the mall is in Annapolis, but it's actually the county. So that one route that they took over from us, which we ran, which is the yellow route, which does go to the high school, it never came into the city proper. It was all county. So they brought that in back in 2018, saying they can run it more efficiently and cheaper. And then all of our buses, which are the top mentioned, the brown, the red, and the green, all go to the mall. So all these buses go from Eastport on Monroe Street is the end of the line to the mall. So that's where they can connect to the other commuter buses, to Baltimore, Washington, New Carrollton, to the Gold, their yellow routes, which goes to the community college and the like. There is a need to better streamline and have a better concerted effort of working with the county to make this a little bit more feasible. Next slide, please. So these maps here that you see, we went over that yesterday with the Transportation Committee, and I'm sorry I don't have one in front of me because there was the spaghetti there of the dotted lines are existing routes and the solid lines were what we were proposing to do differently. But you can see some of the hubs. When you see number 2 way over the far left, we're looking at Annapolis High School. And then you look at number 9 at the bottom right, we're over the Eastport area of Bay Ridge Avenue, Bay Ridge Road, and how can we extend that past and incorporate a little bit more of maybe senior centers. But surprisingly enough, we have quite a few in that area. There's a senior center on Bay Ridge Avenue. There's one on Edgewood Road. There's one behind the CVS on Bay Ridge Road. They all have their own little minivans to take people places, but on their schedule, which would be the mall or a shopping center or whatever. But we're still nearby, less than a half a mile from these places, but we might want to look at how we can better serve that community. And remembering when we talked about the purple route, when it's out there on evenings, on Monday through Saturday evenings and all day Sunday, we're covering just about our whole territory, and we're going about 3/4 of a mile of our fixed route. So we're able to get deeper into Ward 7 and Ward 8, where there might be some mobility challenges. And one of the things we want to look at, because right now, as I mentioned, our time, that go time is covering the route of the orange, and that does not cover inside of Eastport. So that's one of the drawbacks, because we have other services that are inside of Eastport, which is the red and the brown and pretty much the green, even though it's coming across Compromise down 6th Street, Chesapeake Avenue. The other routes, brown and red does go up President Street and back down Hilltop, and the brown does go back down Bay Ridge Avenue, back to the Giant, and then shoots up Forest Drive through Robinwood, Bywater, and the neighborhoods going to the mall. But remember, a lot of these routes were put together some time ago, and looking at the health of our system and trying to make it a little bit better. This is a roadmap of things that we could try to do. Next slide, please. So remember I talked about the regions. You look at region 1, 2, and 3, 1 being down the Annapolis Neck area, and 3 is completely county. And that number 2 over in the corner is the high school within region 3, and you can see 5, or is that 8, the mall. You have AAMC, you have Parole Town Center, and in the center you have about a bit of the Eastport, a little bit of downtown, the Bywater, Tyler Avenue, and all. So one of the questions that came up yesterday is like, okay, one of the ways to run a good micro transit system is to operate within zones. Montgomery County does that. They have 2 zones, and they kind of feed into a transit center. If we try to do zone 1 all the way to 3, you probably need maybe 9 or 10 buses to keep up with the demand. That is of high demand to go over. So we really need to develop this mobility hub a little bit more. Like 1 may go 3/4 of a mile into 2, and vice versa, and 2 3/4 of a mile into 3. But if you have another spine that went around it all, that blue new route that went around, West Street, coming down maybe all the way down to Riva Road, getting back down to Forest Drive and around, and you can take within these systems microtransit within these zones here. These are more developed in our TDP that we can extrapolate and tell you exactly what the thoughts were based on the conversations that were had at the meetings with our stakeholders and shareholders. And next slide, please. Please stop me if there's any questions along the way. And again, this is still draft ideas for a microtransit operation to expand what we're doing. And a lot of systems around the country are finding success with microtransit. And, it is that watered down version of Uber and Lyft, at a fraction of the price, but you're not going from your door to door, but you may be going pretty close to where you were going before if you were just taking the bus from a scheduled stop. You just don't have to go every single stop along the way as a fixed route does. The microtransit is intended to feed into a fixed route or vice versa. They need to coexist to be a healthy system. And that's something that was discussed in detail with our shareholders and others that had a vested interest in what we're doing. Next slide, please. So this is just the third zone. That's just, we brought up zone 1 and 2 a little bit closer, and zone 3 is just showing the same thing. 3, as you can see, is basically all county with the medical center, the mall, Social Security Administration, which I forgot over on Harry Truman Drive, which is also motor vehicle, but as a place of a hub, the high school, the shopping center in Riva, and the Harbor Center. So those 3 maps have just been blown up a little bit better so you can see it a little bit more. Next slide, please. So the conceptual budget, I won't go into the weeds of it, but it was just a proposed looking at other matrices to come up with, if we look at option 1, 2, 3, what would be a potential baseline cost. And some of them, as you can see in the roadmap, there's a cost neutral. Doing this wouldn't cost much or anything. But remember those previous slides, we look at year number 2 for the microtransit zone 1, 2, and 3, the associated costs of actually operating it. Microtransit can be a little bit more expensive, but it's highly more effective of going places that people need to go when they need to go, versus just running a route just to be running it. And Alderman Arnett, again, to your question, if you look further down, you can see things that were talked about with the MTA in Anne Arundel County, how we do a little bit better, maybe getting to Anne Arundel Mills, BWI Airport, Cromwell Station, other routes that, these don't exist, but looking at how we can coordinate with other transportation entities to make this feasible. So we would definitely need funding from the state and federal government. And right now, we are a sub-recipient of a lot of our grants from the state of Maryland, which is good because they keep us on track when we have to, when they look at auditing us, which we get audited every 4 months. One of the offices of what they call locally operated transit systems, which the city of Annapolis is, and there's 22 of these type of systems in the state of Maryland that gets federal funds to operate the system. From as far west as Hagerstown, Cumberland, down to Ocean City, there's 22. We just happen to be one of the smaller ones. But also Anne Arundel County is a recipient as a lot locally operated transit system, just like we are. We're not a sub-recipient or subordinate to Anne Arundel County. We're more of a standalone as they are. But the roadmap that we shared here, and we can definitely entertain questions, and maybe writing them up to us so we can get them out to the full council, not just environmental matters or transportation committee, but anyone that wants it, and we can have a more of a healthy dialogue on what it is we're trying to accomplish. And the baseline, what we're trying to accomplish is what you want to, constituents being able to get movement safely, efficiently, and quickly. And that's what microtransit has really helped us to do, to be able to do in conjunction with a fixed route pulse system.
Is this table in this report?
It's in the one that we gave yesterday. I can make sure that I email it to you this evening.
No, I mean the big.
I'm not sure if it is. I don't think it is.
That would be helpful to.
If it's not, we can definitely put it in. But
especially the footnotes.
Yes, that's definitely in what we gave yesterday. I can definitely share that with you all, the whole council. Yeah, I think that's it. But see if there's another slide there, please. Yeah, so basically, as we made mention, adoption from the City Council, your acceptance does not obligate the City of Annapolis or MDOT, MTA to fund any particular improvement. It's the roadmap to see here's some ideas that came out of our study sessions and our work groups. And implementation of any improvement is a function of funding availability. And that's where we got to look at what makes sense and what we can do then and now. So coexisting in the roadmap of the 2040 comprehensive plan, there might be some carryovers, but understanding that this program was grant funded, and it doesn't mean this is it. We can definitely look at add-ons, doing something additional, parallel later. This was just a very in-depth required by state statutes of getting these funds to make sure we had an independent company a transportation planning organization come out and just take a look at and make recommendations by hearing, while hearing input of the community.
Any questions? No. Any questions from the rest of the committee? Yeah, it's very.
I do,
Alderman
of course.
Arnett?
So I'm returning to the big thing about it really does feel, and that's why I like that table, which I did find in the report Alderman Savage pointed is page chapter 6.5. And the part I like about it is the part that starts to integrate with the rest of the region. And I'm still convinced that we cannot afford to be operating two parallel systems. One or the other is going to die, and it does feel like they need to come together. That's just my analysis. I also feel that this transit plan does need to integrate with the comprehensive plan in a much more formal, linked way. And I will repeat to you something I've said to you often. I understand the goal to provide transit for people who don't have a car, don't have money. But I'm of the feeling that true transportation isn't going to work till you get me on a bus and my neighbors. And I was noting how no system, whatever comes below 6th Street into where I live or over on Boucher Avenue, where a lot of other people and very adjacent to a considerable amount of public housing. So I think we need to do something in addition to this that is broader across departments and much more integrated into planning. Alderman Savage and I were talking about this at lunch, which comes first, the transit and then the affordable housing, which I think is right. I think that you if you start putting in fixed transit of some sort, it's going to encourage people, just like me near the subway when I lived on Capitol Hill. And it encouraged a lot of people. The 1972, 73, no gas encouraged a lot of people to move back into the city and near public transit. But I find this an interesting study, but not sufficient, I guess. And I'm trying to be diplomatic.
No, I appreciate your comments. And one of the things that made mention of with the go time, we actually do service exactly what you're saying. And we do go down to Bread and Butter all the way down to 2nd Street when the purple is in operation, 3/4 of a mile of a fixed route stop. And that's one of the things we were talking about now. Again, as I mentioned, at 3:47 p.m., we are only looking at replacing the orange right now and the purple, which covers the whole city. So unfortunately, until we make these tweaks, after 7 o'clock or on a Sunday or a holiday, I'll come to your doorstep and we'll take go time together and go get some coffee and make our way back. So we do actually service it, but you know, the old cliche, build it and they will come. We got to do more outreach so people in those neighborhoods do know this is available right now in the next 3.5 hours until 10:45, and we're done all day Sunday. But like I mentioned, you know, expanding the routes right now where we have, where we can do more of the go time on demand. That's where we are, and that's where the pilot started. It was just going to be the orange, and we said we'll try to do the gold. The purple as well. So we got to do more of the outreach. We did some at some senior centers like Morse Bloom, Greenwood. We went to the Bates complex with some staff and with KFH. We've done some of that, but we need to do more of that. But we're only 9 months into it. But I think we've made some pretty good headway and some good strides in the time that we have, but we can definitely do more. And we hear you loud and clear.
So with this, I know when I need a ride. When I'm in Washington, I use Uber all the time. I'll park at my son's house and we'll take Uber to the theater, Uber to restaurants, and it's incredibly convenient. It is more expensive than our transit system, and I'm wondering if there isn't some way we can combine forces with them where we may give people with lesser means of some kind of voucher to take that. But the other thing, though, is I have no clue when and where the Purple Line runs and how long it's going to. And it's much easier to push that button in my vehicle than it is to try to go someplace to find out if this is the day and the time when the Purple Line. And until we can make those things so second nature to people, I just don't think we're going to get people out of cars and onto buses.
Yep, that's where education comes in. Wouldn't expect anyone to know the route of the Purple, but our office is open for help, and we would be more than welcome. Would love to be welcomed or invited to go to some of those community events for the Eastport neighbors or Ward 1 residents, or anywhere. However, we can get the word out. But we look for suggestions on how to do that. Because what you're mentioning is we have it, but people don't know about it or how to use it. But if we can only do it with education and just continue to do it. It's not a one and done type of a deal.
Thank you.
So I have a few things, and I do thank you for coming to the committee to testify, because as I think Alderman alluded to, there's a clear connection to the environment, because it does help to get people out of their cars and provides for efficient travel. So a few, simple questions, I suppose. For the microtrans, let me first couple generalizations, which I said yesterday's meeting, but just for the public and the committee's sake, a lot of good information in the surveys, and looking at that, it verifies that the vast majority of the users of the system are lower income. Also, those who don't have cars, and even I think it was 60% who don't even have driver's license. And so we have to have transit clear, and we have to make sure it's adequately funded. But it was interesting, in that if you have 20% of the users only have one car, but if you go beyond that, those who have 2-3 cars, they just don't use, for the most, it seems like they just don't use transit. So my question from an environmental standpoint is, well, how do you get those who have cars out of their vehicles to use transit, right? And that's where our system doesn't seem to be really fitting that need. It's doing a good job, I think, of getting people to work who need it. The one exception is the circulator, right, which we mentioned. It's the most successful route of the cities. If you look at the state metrics anyway. I think because it runs every 15-20 minutes for a headway, and it serves the tourists and the residents just to get around downtown. So I think that shows some of the potential, right? And it's got me thinking, well, maybe, and I may propose this in the budget, but it all comes down to funding, right? But what about expanding that concept of the circulator to Eastport? Because that's probably our most parking, at least the one with the most parking issues, traffic too. But I think obviously Forest Drive has traffic, but we have a route. But I'm wondering, could we extend it, connect it, like I mentioned yesterday, from maybe the terminus of the downtown circulator, run it down through Eastport, and I don't know, maybe connecting up in Ward 7 somewhere, and just having to do that.
And see, this is a really good point, Chairman. There are a lot of economic factors that you can dials you can move to look at what you want. The roadmap is not set in stone, and what we looked at with those zones can actually accomplish some of the things you just mentioned, if not all of them. Some of them may cost a little bit more, but one of the things you look at for going across the bridge, Compromise Street, that on a Saturday or evening or Sundays, how many times is that bridge going to open? I look at maybe we reimagine City Dock, having something from City Dock to Eastport and back.
Mhm.
You don't twist what you've done well with Park Place, Magenta Shuttle to downtown and back. It's a subset, so you're kind of going like that and meeting at the new City Dock, and you can go back up to Park Place or go back to Eastport.
Right.
Those are really good points, and that's really one of the things we're looking at with a microtransit, but why not a Magenta Shuttle with a fixed route? And it has a headway of every 12 to 15 or 20 minutes. So those are the things that can be looked at. One of the things you made mention of is like, how do we use land? When you look at land use, the ease of parking or driving, is that a price that I'll pay if I got to drive Main Street in Duke of Gloucester twice before I find something on Main Street versus waiting for a bus of getting off right where I want to be. But the way the land is being used may have a lot to do with how people view it, their use of it, with a car or the public transportation, with a mobility source like a scooter, bike, moped, or whatever. But that's a thing. I think that's a really good thought. And as we develop that more in our minds of what we can do in those zones and how we can cross over to the next zone. So where do we really want to go when we look at the Ward 7 area of the Bay Ridge Avenue, Edgewood, getting to downtown? Because right now the Bay Ridge Road, Edgewood, we can get to the mall, and then from the mall we can get back downtown, or we can go right to Eastport and then get on the green and go up Main Street. There are options, but knowing the schedule is half of it. As Alderman Arnett says, how do I know when the purple runs? It takes one of those things a lot of people don't know, but one of the things we're working on, you might have seen, is our AVL, Automatic Vehicle Locator. So, there's a transit app that's out there right now for around the country. Maybe 450 different types of organizations are using it. Until we get tied into it properly, it's a predictor for us, meaning it's electronic schedule. So if I turn my location finder on right now, and I say where I am right now and where I want to go to the mall, it will tell me that the green route will be by whatever the schedule predicts, but it's not going to give me exact because it's a predictor. So one of the things we want to do is get the AVL on all of our buses, because right now the Magenta Shuttle has it using Translock, and our microtransit has it using IT Curves, but our other services we don't. So we're working on those pieces to integrate. And I know the county's using something else called Passio, and we want to, get those all together, because remember we talked about that invisible barrier or boundary again in Crofton, and I want to come to City Hall in Annapolis, or I'm at Social Security Administration in the county, and I want to go to City Dock. You can still look at it on Transit app, but it's just going to give you the predictor of when it should come. But we want to get the live real time. So as Ross held up his mobile device, it says I can get Uber or Lyft right here, and I can put my location finder. Your driver should be here in 7 or 8 minutes. Yeah. We want to get to that. It may not be as quick as that, or going to exact place like door to door, but we want to get in a geosphere of within 100 yards, a quarter mile, something like that. So that's really worth.
And I think there are a lot of different ways to address future growth of the system. And I think, as we talk about adding routes or even adding like circulators or other types of transit, I think the question really comes down to funding. And I know Alderwoman Finlayson's been a big champion of trying to make sure transit has enough funding. But we have a lot of work to do, right? You're funded primarily out of the parking fund.
Yes.
But the big question is, even with your proposed expansions, is how are we going to pay for it? And that's where I think go back to Alderman Arnett's point. I think it seems to me we might have a bit of a silo issue, right? I'd like to see a better connect with our planning processes and the comp plan, right? Because again, the conference we were just at, we saw how transit is what jurisdictions use to drive development and redevelopment and economic, reinvestment, and that's what they use to drive these things. But they also use that to pay for the transit at the same time, right? But I feel like we're not really doing that. We've legislation coming up on Monday that's going to be just adding density with no correlation to our transit system. And the problem is then we have no way to pay for your expansions. The future growth, future tax revenue is going to go right into the general fund probably, and we're not even going to set it aside for transit. We're missing an opportunity. We're letting growth get ahead of ourselves when, again, what we saw is these jurisdictions using it transit first. You set up, then you rezone, you make partnerships with the private developers, you set up TIFs, those tax incremental, it's like deferred taxes, right? Using future property taxes to pay for improvements now and into the future, but they use that to pay for the transit. But we're allowing the development to happen without any of those things in place because we don't really have a solid transit expansion plan that goes in conjunction, right? So I'm afraid the problem, my fear with that is that's going to continue to perpetuate the parking issues, traffic issues that we have, because we're going to grow without having any kind of associated funding source for transit. So that's what's really making me nervous. I know it's mixing topics, but there's a lot going on right now that's making me nervous about how that's going to work. So I don't know if there's anything you can do to, I don't know, like, have you had those conversations with the planning department as far as how to really sync those planning growth with transit growth?
Yeah, that's a good question because Chief Comprehensive Officer Eric Lashinsky, as well as Casey Ortiz, have been a part of it, and they've made their opinions be known, or their thoughts, and they've been a part of it. We can bring them in, and they can share what parts of it were theirs that were incorporated. But yeah, they were part of the stakeholder process, and they've attended. One of them have attended every single meeting that we've had. Sometimes both of them.
If I could interject here.
We have two hands up, so I'm going to go to Alderman Finlayson first.
Well, just as a general comment, two things really. I believe that we need to start thinking about transit as a service to the community. Mm-hmm. We don't talk about how to fund the police department or the fire department or public works. But we talk about how we can gather the money to pay for transit. And I contend that until we start looking at transit as much a vital component to our community as we see other police and fire, then we're going to continue to have this problem. So I hope that, my colleagues on the council will begin to see transit as a vital part of living in a city, and that they begin to fund it as appropriate, which includes your plans for the future. And, the fact that you raised the issue about development and no plans for it, the fire department raised the exact same issue in their budget presentation to the finance committee. We're adding more and more residents, but are we doing anything to increase the number of firefighters? We have a hard time finding paramedics and ALS folks. And the numbers, our community is growing. So we can't continue to provide the same level of service with the same number of people. And so, that's a comparable issue for you. And again, that's a council issue. We've got to recognize that, when we approve projects, what should come along with them would be improvements on the other services. And I know that strayed a little bit away from yours and funding transit, but we've got to think of transit as a vital part of our community.
Yeah, thank you.
So, thank you.
I'm following along Alderwoman Finlayson's comments. I think transit should be integral to our life. but we deal with it in a very, we the council,
Mhm.
disintegrated
Mhm.
way. We talked to
Right.
Ms. Director Moore, and then we talked to Director Kubiak. We don't have anything where we get all the heads together in the room where we're talking about it together. And really, our function is sort of twofold. It's trying to understand what you're doing and then try to figure out how we can help you do, you, all the departments, better. Not get in the way, but help you do it better. But I think that we need to integrate it and not have it in these separate silos all the time. And I don't know how we do that. I think it really needs to be a change in a fundamental way that the city council operates and
Mhm.
demand that we be served in this planning function. Our role is policy, and part of policy is the planning to effectuate that policy, and we just don't have mechanisms that do that. I thought we've had a very good dialogue, and I appreciate your presentation and tolerating my questions, but I wish we were having it with 2 or 3 other department heads and a finance director here, so all ears could be hearing the same thing at the same time. Otherwise, we're just not going to move forward.
Sounds like a good work session.
May I
Alderman?
quickly respond? You know, it starts with us and our budget. You know, we should be putting in our budget whatever is needed for transit, not the shortfall, which forces us then to find the funds that are lacking. But we don't have this discussion about police budget. You know, and so it starts when the mayor presents his budget, it should be inclusive of total funding.
I think we should start in October
Well, that's
with
no,
the
yeah,
mayor
yeah, absolutely
and
right.
make a budget jointly. We're going to have such a cacophony next week when everybody starts showing up and discussing this.
Don't remind us. Yeah. So, but all right. So before we leave this, on that related to that point, I want to also bring up. It looks like fares, and you mentioned this earlier a little bit. So to the point of cost, fares bring in $300 some thousand, or last fiscal year, I believe, $300 some thousand. But that is supplemented by other jurisdictions who are paying to make up for the fee that their employees basically use, right?
Right. We said their Department of DGS, Government Services, instead of having their employees pay and get reimbursed that way, they're paying for them up front. That's the DGS organizational paid fares. And then there's others that will buy them that are, like I said, the Lighthouse Shelter, Arundel Lodge, the detention center. There's probably 7 or 8. That number is just shy of $15,000. DGS is about $275,000. Going fare free, that goes away. So the 300 plus that other.
Well, not necessary. And to the other city employees, we're going to wrap it up soon and get to you. But just to make the point, Director, like, I don't think that's necessarily set in stone. Is I think that's the key point for our colleagues here. If we can identify that $300,000 to make up for the lost fare, the next step is whomever may go to these other jurisdictions like DGS and say, look, we're going fare free because of XYZ, but we still need this payment from you, and have some kind of MOU with them for the next umpteen years so they continue to pay. But I think it's worthwhile. That's a good first step to the system, because what we've seen is systems that are free do get greater use. Right.
Yeah.
And that's our first step to make sure it's fully funded. So I think if we can identify things, and maybe we need to wait on hiring some of these other positions that we are proposing in the budget.
You brought up a good point, because I really would think that the county would still supplement us for handling some of their area. That we almost count on still being there. We look at certain things with the county as well, like the Magenta Shuttle. Part of its success is the circuit court.
Yeah.
So, maybe they will help, come to the table with stuff. But I just looked at it as being, it's free, so my state employees aren't paying, so why am I paying?
Yeah.
But maybe they come to the table with some other type of guarantee MOU that says, we're helping the whole system work. as it's intended to do for the good of the order.
So is there a motion from the committee? I know there are going to be a few minor changes to the TDP. Do we want to wait till we get those, or do we want to just make our recommendation now?
Well, Mr. Chair, I'm comfortable making the recommendation.
You,
I mean,
you
and we
are or
have
you
I am, and we have the entire plan that's on the plan. Isn't that what we're
Yep.
talking about? I mean, we have all 129 pages of the plan, but I'm comfortable with doing it now. I mean, Alderman Arnett, are you comfortable?
No, I'm not, but I'm not sure. This is required. And they're doing what they're required to do to get grant money. I don't find it satisfying, and I'll probably abstain or vote against it. But I'm not even sure how relevant it is to doing the kinds of things we need to do to move forward. I'm a little encouraged by the financial section in Chapter 6, but I think we need to do things differently.
So it's not going to help us to vote it down, because that would prevent us from getting funding to improve the system. Now, I mean, I'm sympathizing that. I think the one area I would like to get feedback on is from planning and zoning, and so if we have time, I'm kind of inclined to maybe invite them to the next meeting. We could have a conversation with them about how to tie that in with transportation.
Is there a timeline?
They're coming to the end, KFH, as far as presenting, because like we mentioned in the last slide, this does not obligate the city of Annapolis or the council to vote on anything, adopt anything. It's really the roadmap of here's an idea if you want to get to this place. And it may not be the right way. It may be another way, but it's just the idea. So there's nothing there that's tied into a financial obligation. But the timeline has come, but if it goes a little longer, we can discuss it more while it's still open, or we can continue the conversation even after it's adopted. We'll never shy away from that meeting with the ATC or anyone else, a work session or anything else, to look at how we want to use what's been provided to us from the transportation planners.
And it's going to be modified anyway by the Transportation Committee. So it's coming back to next month's Transportation Committee for final action. So again, I don't think us recommending it now is not going to make a difference. Our meeting is the day after transportation anyway. So we can just postpone an action if we want to. It's not.
And I ask that at the next meeting or some intervening meeting that we have both planning and transportation together. I think, I'm not sure how much they're hearing each other. They may well be, but I'm not sensing it. But otherwise, if you want to move today, I'll just abstain.
Well, if the committee's open to it, we could try to schedule an interim meeting. Not that any of us need more meetings, but
No.
well, how about we just, are you okay if we just take no action today? We'll postpone action and then figure out if we need to do anything in the interim.
I'm fine with that. If Mr. Moore is fine with, since it's got to go back to the Transportation Committee, then, and we're the day after, we could just hear about what they've discussed the next day. And
Or is that okay? It's not going to cause you any delay, I don't think.
But don't feel like you have to give us another presentation.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. So, Jackson, could you add this to the next agenda? And then next, I'm going to skip temporarily the next piece of legislation so we can get to staff. So they can get out of here. So first up, I think We have a stormwater fee discussion, ID 4025. Oh, Eastport, that's fine. Eastport is ID 6825. Huh?
You have,
Well, we don't. Do we have plan and zoning here?
no, that's what
So that's what we don't have. So we can jump right to ID 68. Computer just. ID 6825. I know. We'll take care. Is nobody's here? Take care of the end. It'll be. I mean, both Sheila and Ross are on rules, and they already
Yes.
voted on that anyway. We don't really need to do anything. So, yeah. Do you have a presentation?
I have a couple slides just to show you guys some updates on the AMRI.
In the meantime, can you introduce yourselves?
I can go first while you're doing all that. Jasmine Wilding, engineer with Public Works, program manager for the Eastport Flood Mitigation, project manager for the Eastport Flood Mitigation Capital Project in the city budget.
I'm Gabe Coey. I'm the Director of Programs for the Resilience Authority of Annapolis and Anne Arundel County.
And I think we were here a couple months ago. So Gabe has looks like similar slides to then, and so I'll let him go first. But I think we're expecting in the next month or so that we'll have a lot more meat to go through. But.
Yeah, so thanks. I think. Okay. We don't mind sharing. So again, my name's Gabe with the Resilience Authority. And one of the things we've been working with the city on is an Annapolis Maritime Resilience Initiative. So it was funded through NIFWIF NCRF grant, which is National Coastal Resiliency Fund. And we've been partnering with Jasmine mainly at the city on her FEMA grant to look at Eastport's footprint. We're really looking at, actually, let me just go to, we're really looking at, wards 6, 7, and 8. And what we've been doing over the past couple of months since the last time we came in front of the committee was going out and talking to community members about where they're experiencing flood issues. So we're partnered with GreenVest and Council Fire to do a lot of assessment, desktop assessment, and looking at hydrology and things like that. But we've also been going into the community, going to business associations, going to Eastport Civic Association, going to all kinds of Earth Day events to really understand where people are experiencing the flood issues. From that experience, we were able to put together this list of roughly 38 project sites where nature-based solutions could be viable. So again, we're looking for ways to remove impervious surfaces, to implement kind of nature-based techniques to slow the flow of water and also to kind of mitigate the flood impacts. And then we're working with Jasmine, who's got some FEMA funding to look at maybe some more of like the gray infrastructure type of applications. So this is, our 38 sites. From here, we've worked with the team to come up with a project prioritization metric. And that's really looking at the potential resilience impact, the green infrastructure network potential, project feasibility, and then the social impact. So what we're going to do is using this metric, we're going to be working with the team to go through all of these 38 sites. There may be more as we get into this, and really pare this down to 10 priority sites using this metric kind of table. From there, those 10 sites get developed to a 10% concept plan. And then just at the beginning of this week, I guess on Tuesday, we put in a pre-proposal for phase 2 funding from NIFWIF through that same National Coastal Resiliency Fund to take some of those projects. We probably won't get all 10, but some of those projects through final design and permitting so that with them we can go and build these projects so that the community is having those benefits and those impacts. So by June, so again, like Jasmine said, we're kind of at a working point right now. We'll have those 10 identified sites early to mid-June. And then if we're invited to submit that full proposal through NCRF, that will happen July 17th. Late August, early September, we'll have kind of a full master plan, all of those 10 concepts. And really, we're committed to working with the city, but also partners at Severn River Association, some other watershed organizations, to look at how we can fund all of these projects or really advance all of these projects, specifically those top 10 priority projects. So I believe I worked with Ms. Jackie Goud. I believe I'm on the June 12th agenda again to come back and really be able to show you guys those 10 sites and dig in a little bit further about how we got there.
And I'll just add, I've been watching what Gabe's doing and monitoring, the federal situation as it unfolds with FEMA. So what I've been able to do with the city program is, so far I've only spent $10,000 piggybacking on the outreach that Gabe is doing. I had an outreach component of my grant as well. And I think we've at least doubled the outreach originally planned by being able to leverage with them. There's a budget amendment I'm working on right now to reflect the loss of a FEMA grant that was showing up in FY26. We still have the previous FEMA grant. And then the other federal partnership we were going to leverage was the Army Corps. But because it's been so slow and I've gotten proposals to do similar work to what they were going to help with at only a $20,000 cost differential to the city, I'm planning to proceed with that. And so what that part is modeling of the storm drain system in Eastport. And I should say that if you pull up your map again, Gabe, where I'm focusing my efforts is sort of just Eastport proper, so 6th Street and East. So I have a little more narrow geographic region. I picked that because there's a lot of points of interest in there, as you can see on the map. A lot of publicly owned street ends and right-of-way areas and storm drain infrastructure in that area. But that's not to say that nature-based, components couldn't be a part of those solutions. And so I think the next step is with the modeling that we're going to have a private firm do, and Gabe's prioritization matrix. We'll have a really good idea of what are the best projects to proceed with. And I think it would make sense to use the remaining city and FEMA funds to augment some of the 10% designs if they overlap with what we want to do, or, we'll see what we can afford to design how many areas with the funding that we have left, which is about, I think, like $300,000. So, and the city's already done a lot of great plans showing vulnerable areas in Eastport, the hazard mitigation plan, the Annapolis flood resiliency plan. So the modeling is just going to take that a step further and say, for this size of storm, tidal or rain, what can we do? So the model will put in some flood mitigation options to see, what could be the most beneficial cost. And it might be that the larger storms, there's not a whole lot that can be done, but we know we have a lot of nuisance flooding. And so it may be, how do we not make the worst scenario worse, but how do we make, a series of other storm events better? And so it'll be, preventing tidal flooding, but then also allowing, similar to City Dock has pumps and things, and we've put in a pump in Eastport too, making sure we can get the rainwater out and we're not going to be, flooding from the inside. So I've been watching the Naval Academy progress and their ideas, and City Dock, and then Gabe. So, hoping that we can get some good flood mitigation projects in Eastport starting to get designed in the next fiscal year. So that's all. And we also plan to have a stakeholder meeting. I think Gabe was alluding to this, probably in the early July timeframe, to kind of parse out, like, we had an early stakeholder meeting with the museum and the Resiliency Authority, and this one might be a little bigger, but a lot of people are interested in. And so how do we leverage all the resources we have in this climate to the most benefit?
Very well, thank you too. Any questions from the committee?
Yeah.
Alderman, any
No, I'm
questions?
good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right, hold on. I do have a
go ahead,
question. So does this have a CIP page?
It does, yes. And yeah, that's what I was just mentioning. I have an amendment with Jake and Darren to correct some of the evolving information as it unfolds. But basically, our FY22 FMA FEMA grant is still good, and that was the bigger one. The FY23 FEMA grant that was showing up in 26, that one was rescinded or just not continued. And like I said, the Army Corps reached out earlier this week, but they're still trying to find new starts and budgeting, so it's kind of still at stage 0 for them. So to keep it moving, I think we've got enough momentum.
So the
So it was 150,000 in 26 that got taken back
what
of
about
grants.
27, 28, 29?
And so all of those in the revised budget those will show up as pending grants. So no construction grants have yet been applied to.
So you only have 350 approved and 185 in bond.
Yes.
So I guess because now's the time. Well, I guess you'll have an opportunity to introduce more amendments, but our cutoff is tomorrow. But I'm asking because we're running out of time. If you do need more funding, more bond funding, we need to know soon to get that allocated for future years.
Yeah, I'm trying to be fiscally, conscientious. I mean, I think I don't have it
At
in
least a
front of
few
me at the
people
moment,
are.
but I have about 500,000 to get some kind of design and something ready for permitting, whether that's backfill. Like I personally think that's enough. But I've seen the
500.
range of design costs fluctuate. Like Gabe is spending 800,000 on 10% designs. I'm not sure if I would have spent that way, but I think I want to focus on the most important areas first. And, I think the other 38 or however many project sites aren't going to go away, but so we can, work those in the future. But I think we have enough funding now to work for the next fiscal year. Like I said, I've only spent 10,000 of my 475 or how much I have now.
But I guess, as far as future project costs, we don't have anything. That's going to take care of the design and the planning, but not construction. So I guess it's a question for us too. If we want to set aside any amount of money, even as a rough planning perspective, how much a year we might, do you have any idea how much a year you might want to spend in project money? You did have 500,000 in FY27 and then, $1 million.
Yeah, I
years
would
after
say
that.
what's in there now is the kind of planning guesstimates, and there are some bond funding in there for those. It's looks like it's not quite half. But I think one element that the modeling will also help with is quantifying what the benefit of doing the project versus not doing it is. And unless we have that, we can't really go after future FEMA grants. And then kind of wait to see how it goes with Gabe with NIFWIF. The reality is it might, we might have a delay, depending on what grants we can get. But I think having a solid design and benefit cost analysis is going to set us up for success if that's, has to get delayed a year because of funding. But I guess this is the best information we have right now. But
Yeah. Well, so it impacts part of my ward and mostly Eastport. So let me question my colleague too. I'm kind of inclined to to put in
I've also been
placeholder.
leveraging the waterfront infrastructure projects. I've started inviting that program manager to our meetings, and
the individual CIP waterfront.
yeah,
project?
there's like so many of them. But I mean, if there's resiliency components to any of those, and there's fun, we could leverage funding off of each other intelligently to stretch it further. Like if she's already going to do a whole new bulkhead and the model is showing this also could like be a game changer, a backflow, I don't know, the design and, experts will tell me what's best. But if there's just a little thing to add to her project, it could be more cost effective to spend the funds jointly on waterfront infrastructure.
I hear you, but I
yeah.
think that still has a little too much uncertainty for my taste. So what I think we might want to think about is just, even I don't know if we want to do it as a committee or what, but I'd propose even just for fiscal year 27, 28, 29, at least put a placeholder of like $500,000 to play it safe. If we get grant money, great, we can remove that. But again, I just feel like
There's
because if
already
we
a
don't-
$500,000.
There's what?
There's already a $500,000 in 27.
I thought you said that was not available. This is grant money.
I'm showing it on 27. There was a $500,000 of bonds and a $500,000, well, 550,000 bonds and 500,000 grant. So there's sort of placeholders already, but I'm going to be editing this tomorrow around lunch. So if you
I see,
think
I see your
we need
point.
more, yeah.
I missed the top.
And
Okay.
Alderman, if I can add, so part of what the grant is going to deliver when I mentioned the master plan that we should be getting late summer, early fall, there will be with those 10% designs, there will also be a financial plan
Okay.
and like a strategy is what we've called it, a financial strategy to try to get through all of those. So that's something that our partners at Greenvest and Council Fire and the Resilience Authority, along with the city, will be working on to at least have some strategy for getting funding.
All right.
May
Yeah.
I ask along the same lines? And I apologize, I had to step out for an emergency call. Are you not worried about any grant funding being eliminated tomorrow? I mean, the way we hear,
Yeah.
things are being.
So the way the MDEM applications work, I mean, I don't know what the climate is with NIFWIF. Gabe
I
can speak to that, but with FEMA, you apply during the notice of intent, and you apply to the state, and then the state decides whether they want to submit that application as an FMA, which is a flood mitigation assistance grant, or a BRIC grant, building resistant infrastructure communities. And the Eastport, all of my FY22s were submitted as FMA grants, and those have all been untouched. For some reason, MDEM submitted I thought it would be FMA again, but they submitted the 26, it's our 26, but their 23 focused Eastport grant design into BRIC, and that got canceled. So everything that's been canceled to date has been BRIC. That word has been problematic. So I'm not worried about the 3 I already have, because I feel like they've all, been looked over, and I've met with the new MDEM POCs. I just submitted my first reimbursement request. So I'm just proceeding. I mean, I think everyone's worried just a little generally about everything, but no, I'm, operating as usual for those 3 grants. Yeah.
Well, that's probably the best approach.
Yeah.
I'm not even worried about the local state folks. I'm worried about the national folks that are making.
Yeah. And when I
decisions.
say MDEM, then they go to FEMA with it. So they're sort of the actual applicant, and then we're the sub. But I mean, I guess in my head, I'm just trying to be ready with a solid design and construction ready, for when funding is available, and whichever route we find it, we can continue.
Throw a lot of eggs in the basket. We'll throw a lot of the eggs in the basket. See what happens.
Good.
Got to try.
Right.
All right.
Thank you.
I'd like to move on, unless there are any burning questions, because we have a couple of things to get to. So thank you all. Next up, you're here for another one.
I have Cars Beach too, but I can wait.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, let's do Cars Beach, ID 9725.
Is that okay?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. And Alderwoman Finlayson did mention that Elktonia Park, we need to work on that nomenclature. So I know that that's on the screen, but that's something I'll take back to the team, especially with Roz and her team at Parks and Rec. But yeah, just to give an update on the design process. So very similar to AMRI, we've been doing a lot of engagement with our team at Scape and McAdams. They were here in January and February doing a lot of public outreach and really looking at how the community wants to reactivate the beach and also how they would respond to the design of the beach. And so this is just an example of some of the boards that were up and folks voting as they came through. But as you can see, so activating the beach, people were really interested in the fishing, kayaking, swimming, and sunbathing, and having seating in the area. Design of the beach, really looking at like Assateague and Mattapeake, more of a sandy beach with a large cove that felt safe for swimming. And then it talks a little bit about the resilience of the beach, and I'll talk about that a little bit more. So I believe, and Alderwoman Finlayson said that she grew up going to the beach, which is fantastic, but it's very far from what it was many years ago, back in the 1930s and before. So it's a very narrow beach now. We do have an exposed sewer manhole there that we're working with the county to remove, or to at least move back away from that shoreline. And we really want to get it back to support public gatherings, to swim again, and to really honor the legacy of this area. As you can see, since 1932, there's been about 93 feet of erosion. Really, a lot of that has happened since 1994. Almost 60 feet of this erosion has happened since 1994. So it is eroding quickly, and again, that's really easy to see when you're there because of this exposed sewer pipe. And so that's really pushing some of this design and the way that we're approaching it. The other piece, again, from the Resilience Authority, so we're thinking very climate forward and how we can protect these community assets in the long term. Sea level rise is of concern at this beach, and so we're using a lot of science from the University of Maryland Center for Environmental Science and some interpretation from DNR to look at the Annapolis gauge and look at the emissions pathways to understand that a 2-foot sea level rise is something that we can expect somewhere between the next 30 and 55 years. And so that leads us to some of our design thinking in having to really protect the future park that we're going to be building there. As you can see, with 2 feet of sea level rise, there's this area, this tidal area that becomes tidally influenced over those times. So one of the things that the design team is proposing, this is just an overshot again, is to kind of take that area now to allow relief for some of this during storm events and other things, and really create a kayak launch and a get down area, which is a seating area and a way for environmental education to occur. But really overall, it becomes a larger beach. There are these headland areas that can be planted, that can be used for fishing. The pier is going to be a part of our park planning, so that's kind of a separate discussion happening at this point. But you can see in this, it's relocating the manhole. There's vegetated dunes that are about elevation 7, but the whole beach is going to come up to about elevation 5. And so really it's going to be bringing in some materials to build this beach back up so that during large storm events, as we experience sea level rise issues, this beach will be sustainable and resilient. Will it be there forever? When we look 80 years to 100 years, it may not. Eventually, it may be underwater. But we think we can have a good 50-plus year experience with this area and really address stormwater and the sea level rise. When I mentioned stormwater, there's this upland stormwater conveyance that you can say kind of on the bottom of the screen. That's on the south side there. That really helps capture some of the stormwater from the community that's south of there, but also helps to relieve some of the water from the future park areas. So that can really become usable for the passive programming that's being planned. So again, our vision for this area, the seating, this is kind of where the get down idea is coming from. So people can really access that tidal area, especially kids, and see what's happening there. But a lot of swimming, a lot of kayaking, opportunities for citizen science, and really sunbathing and kind of activation of that area. Whoops, I'm sorry. I thought I hit all these. This is, if we're interested, I can get into some of these things, but in the interest of time, this is really just more of the design and how we're pushing that kind of water out and where at different elevations, mean high water and stuff, we'll see inundation events. So again, just another kind of vision view of the park. You can see on the back end, the kayak launch, these vegetated dunes, a big beach area, and then access to the water. One last view of it, just because it's nice to see different renderings. What we expect from here, so we've started the conversation with Maryland Department of the Environment. We went in front of their shoreline protection review team in April 3rd. So we're waiting for some preliminary feedback from them. We've started talking with the city critical area folks and initiated conversations with the county or state critical area, because there is going to be some concern, some tidal impact, as well as non-tidal wetland impact. And so we want to make sure that we're getting this in front of a lot of those regulatory agencies in the near term. We expect 60% designs for Cars Beach in the next week. And so again, I plan to come back in June, if that's okay with the committee, to show you a little bit further designs, and we'll have more input from MDE and critical area at that time. And then also the future park concepts are planned to be delivered May 15th. And so we'll have more idea about what the McAdams team has vision for the park area, the kind of grayed out area there. And they're delivering us 2 concepts that then, again, we'll be working with Roz and her team to really identify what pieces of those concepts we want to bring forward into a final design. And the last thing I'll mention is that although these are being done, the park planning and the shoreline planning are being done kind of through separate contracts. There is a lot of conversation happening between these 2 teams so that it is one comprehensive park where the usage, the programming is all going to happen. And actually, speaking of programming, Blacks of the Chesapeake Foundation that you all know has been very active on this site and involved in this site. And, we're working to really honor Vince's legacy here. Dee Dee Strum and her team have a National Park Service grant through Chesapeake Gateways, and they're already starting to pull together folks and curriculum for the educational programming of the site. So, they're looking at all kinds of options from video options and, AI and different ways for folks to really understand the history of the site and also the future of the site and how they want to program education. So it's moving. I'll have more information next month, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions from the committee?
Looks great.
I do have a question. First of all, thank you, and I'm
Absolutely.
excited. And yes, I did grow up on the real Cars beaches. The water, because we used to swim there.
Yes.
Is there a drop off or?
It will be a very gradual 10-to-1 slope. So that's kind of the most sustainable from a resilience perspective. So when we do living shorelines, that's kind of the slope that we want to get to because it's a very stable slope, allows water to come in during inundation events, but then when it goes away, it doesn't rip the sand out and take it with it. So yes, for swimming perspective, it will be very accessible. For wading, there won't be a big drop off. There will be times of year as the tide in the bay is a little bit different. So there will be sand. I believe during summer months, sand might go away, and then during winter months, it might accrete a little bit. But the stability of that slope will maintain. There is concerns about what's in the water now, right? Because people haven't swam there for quite some time. We know there's a sewer pipe that goes about 400 yards out into this main stem of the bay. It's clean effluent, but it's it's treated effluent at least. So there will be some assessment done, especially before we start building, to make sure that there's nothing dangerous in the water there. And these vegetated headlands, of course, will be further off. And I know Roz and her team are planning on having lifeguards here and things of that nature as well to make sure that it's a safe place to swim.
The sand.
Yes.
Are you bringing in good sand. One of the things
Absolutely.
I never liked. I love the beach.
Yeah.
Loved all the amenities, the entertainment, the rides, everything. But the sand was always hard.
We will bring it so as fine a sand as we can, right? So there's
Yeah.
there's a lot of different kind of sizing specs that we have to work with. And again, on the headlands, we're going to have larger boulders and then smaller boulders between there and then sand in between there because that's what we can actually plant
Mhm,
vegetation in.
mhm.
But the sand is all very clean sand. It's silicone sand. It's, where it's sourced is either, if we have opportunities to do beneficial reuse of dredge material right from the bay that can be, it's clean. We have to test it
Mhm.
and all of those things, but that's one option. Or there's sand pits locally, in Pennsylvania, Maryland, and Virginia where it comes from. But it is clean. It's very fine. It won't be, dirty, for lack of a
Mhm.
better term. There might be rack lines after, things like that happen in the bay where SAV and different, things may come onto the beach, but that's just something we'll have to maintain.
Okay. Good sand. That's all.
Yes, good sand. Hey, I'm going to write it down. No, for sure. That is, it's been discussed. And yeah, we're going to make sure that the material we bring in, not only native to the Chesapeake Bay and, great for the habitat, but also safe and welcoming for
Mhm.
visitors.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and I do appreciate you giving us an update on this. I'm
And you'll
glad.
welcome him back next.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm really glad that the beach replenishment is going to take place of some kind.
Mhm.
Because I was thinking the same thing when you were showing the photos of the narrow beach. That is a good addition. And as far as future, like when you do get the point you mentioned, Rec and Parks wants to pick what components, be sure to include us because it's my ward, but we have somebody who actually is has a history there and has been there. So I think it's important to get our perspective early in the process as opposed to later.
For sure. As I said, we should have the two concepts from the park planning folks middle of this month. I think the Friday the 15th is when they deliver those. And so we'll be in a really good spot. They're giving us we asked for 4 weeks to review that so that we can get it in front of different committees, make sure that Roz, the mayor, everybody has a chance to look at it and provide feedback. So for sure, we'll make sure you see both of those and have input.
Great. Thanks so much.
Yeah,
Mhm.
thank you.
And I do
Appreciate the opportunity.
think that we should, I know you two aren't going to be here but next time, but and who knows, maybe I won't either. But it'd be
What
good.
do you
I
mean
think we
next
should.
time? When are we leaving?
I mean, I'm thinking in the future because I think it'd be good to. It'd be good to. We should really do this more with other CIP projects. Get updates. All right. So next on the agenda we have. Let's see. We're going back right to stormwater fee discussion.
We didn't rearrange our agenda, did we? When we
Yes.
approved it? No. Okay. We're good.
I see 3 attachments. Is there a particular one we should be looking at?
ENV.
It's the last.
All right. Could you introduce yourselves for the record, please?
Mike Rosberg, Stormwater Program Manager, Public Works.
Ann Roederer, Stormwater Engineer, Public Works.
And I'm Dave Hyder with Stantec.
And I think you were going to update us on the incentive program, the credit program, right?
Yeah, that's correct. I do have a little bit of background just in terms of the stormwater fee structure, but I'll go through that quickly. Some of it to address some of the questions from last time. As we've talked about before, the whole basis of a stormwater fee is to use impervious area as the basis or the measurement of potential contribution to the system. What was presented to the Finance Committee last week was a 15% increase in the stormwater fees. And so that's what's being recommended. And that's for adoption under the current fee structure. So you can see the current fee structure shown here. So for fiscal year 26, the single family would be $35.45, multifamily would be $17.43, and then you can see the various tiers for non-residential customers. So what we've talked about before is changing the fee structure for non-residential parcel owners changing that structure with the goal of essentially aligning to more closely aligned industry standard, provide more equity in terms of the billing approach, so that essentially you'd be charging based upon actual measured impervious area and equivalent residential units, or ERUs, would be the approach. And so what's essentially what would look like in terms of recommended structure is for non-residential, your measured impervious area, the number of ERUs you have, one ERU being 2,100 square feet of impervious on your parcel. You would pay per ERU at $35.45 in fiscal year 26. Real briefly, and just in terms of an example, so this is a non-residential parcel. They've got 21,000 square feet of impervious made up of a roof and parking lot. So it essentially equates to 10 ERUs. So that 10 ERUs times the 35.45 would mean that they would have a quarterly stormwater bill of $354. So what this looks like, I wanted to provide a little bit of a comparison to some similar sized cities, some surrounding jurisdictions in terms of the non-residential stormwater fees. So this is for a parcel that's got that 21,000 square feet of impervious. You can see currently today in the tiered structure with the current fiscal year 25 rates, they're paying $152 per quarter. With the 15% increase without a rate structure change, they'd pay $175 a quarter.
This is for non-residential.
This is for non-residential, 10 ERUs. So it's going to vary, obviously, depending upon how big you are. With the new fee structure, because now it would be based on their ERUs, it would go up to $354 for this particular parcel. It's important to note that we'll talk about in a moment the credits. This does not include any credits. So to the extent that somebody received credits, they could essentially reduce that by about 50%.
And these are annual.
These are quarterly.
These are quarterly.
Yep, quarterly. So one more slide, I think, for me is just in terms of the amount of revenue that's generated on the system. So this slide shows the current revenue in fiscal year 25 from residential property owners, about 1.7 million. Non-residential property owners is about 900,000. With the 15% increase, you can see residential revenues would go up to about 1.9, close to 2 million. Non-residential revenues would be about $1 million. And then with the fee structure change, we would get an additional amount of revenue for non-residential properties. So that would go up to 1.4 million. So that fee structure change without any credits equates to about $400,000 per year in additional revenue.
But it's important to point out the residential stays the same. It's just the non-residential.
Correct.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, would you repeat that? I didn't-
So the residential stays the same even with the new structure. It's just the non-residential commercial properties essentially that are going to be increasing.
That's correct. So just to kind of go over it one more time. So the current amount of revenue you're generating is fiscal year 25. Fiscal year 26, without any rate structure change, just reflects a 15% increase in the fees.
That takes it to 1.03.
Yep,
Okay.
correct. But what we're proposing is a new fee structure. And if you move to that new fee structure for non-residential parcels, it would generate an additional about $400,000.
But it's also important to point out the new fee structure you're proposing for non-residential is the same fee structure as residential. It's the ERU based, more
It is.
closely ERU based model.
It's
Because
no
that's-
longer tiers. So
Right. There are no
Yeah.
more tiers, but it's purely ERU. So in my mind, that puts it on equal. This would treat commercial equal than residential, I think is
true. To the extent every residential pays the same. They're all one ERU. So it is ERU based.
all residentials are. I thought they were.
Yes, they're all treated the exact same. So there is no variation in terms of residential properties. They all pay the same.
I thought that. Okay. So is that the same thing the county does? I thought the county had some more.
No, the county does the
ERU.
same.
They do?
It's per
Do other jurisdictions have it actually be determined based on your actual impervious surface?
There are some. There's not a lot that do it based on actual, similar to what we're proposing for non-residential. What you'd see similar to like Baltimore City or in DC, they have tiers of impervious. So it's similar to your non-residential is pretty common for single family. Just because generally there's so many more single family parcels to actually measure every one and have that precision is one of the reasons why communities do tiers for
I could see
residential.
that, but I mean, it just seems a little inequitable to me in the fact that somebody who has a little row home is paying the same amount as someone who has a big mansion on what road's the mayor on? Can I pick on him? In whatever, Spa View Road, right? It seems a little unfair to have to pay the same thing.
Mhm. Yeah, there's trade-offs in terms of the administrative aspects of it versus you have a
But
much
it
more.
It should be like ideally automatically calculated based on a GIS system, and it's all baked into
Mhm.
whatever formulas and calculations you have. As you get the new aerials, AI automatically calculates it. But I'm just wondering if it's worth. And again, I can't do that this year, but in the future, maybe I'll put it on my what do you call it, parking lot. As far as just at least creating another tier structure for residential.
Yeah, you could do that. You're right in terms of the actual measurements aren't difficult, but you do get a lot more feedback if you have residents are more likely to call up and say, hey, I measured my property and they forgot to do the eaves and therefore they're improperly measuring their impervious. So you do get more feedback if you go to that level of precision. Tiers would eliminate that because then they would be kind of put in those
But
buckets.
that's what I'm thinking is even residential, maybe if you at least have 2 or 3 tiers, I don't know, off the top of my head, 1,000 feet, 5,000, 10,000 feet, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Because stormwater is different depending upon your socioeconomic status.
well, yeah, your roof size, right? Roof and driveway size.
But you're paying for that in the ERU or whatever. The
Yeah,
amount
but
that you're-
but again, a 2,000 square foot roof on a townhome is paying the same as a 10,000 square foot roof on a big mansion.
But the big mansion is paying
The
more.
big mansion has
because they have more lot.
no, they're paying the same thing on this model, which I didn't realize.
But
So-
they're paying more in other areas, maybe not just stormwater, but there are other taxes and,
Oh,
and
sure.
the like. They're paying considerably more.
But the idea of a fee, utility fee, is that they pay based on, in
Contribution.
this case, it's
Mhm.
not necessarily usage, but it's impact, right? The amount of
Yeah.
stormwater the infrastructure has to manage. Anyway, I'll add that to the back burner. Thank you.
Okay. And it's important to note that that $400,000 additional revenue assumes, again, there's no credits. We're going to talk about credits in a moment. So to the extent that you make that structure change for non-residential properties, they apply for credits. Maybe they get a 50% credit. We're forecasting you're not actually going to see that full incremental amount because we want people to encourage people to manage stormwater on their properties. So my next slide just shows, given the distribution of non-residential properties, there are some that would actually see a bill reduction. So this just shows the distribution of non-residential properties going from the current fee structure to a per ERU basis. So you'd see some that actually fall in the lower end of the tier and therefore they see a benefit in going to the actual measurements, whereas there's some that see pretty substantial increases. That's the distribution.
Wait, could you explain that again?
Sure.
So this is the distribution of impact.
Yeah, this is the number of,
Oh, I see. The left is the after the credit. Is that what you're saying?
this is no, just purely from going to the new structure.
Oh,
So when we switch from the small, medium, and large
yeah.
structure, which is a range, there are people that are, say they're in the medium range right now, but they're on the low end of the medium range, so they're actually kind of getting a break right now, and the people at the high end, yeah. So it'll balance out a little bit. It'll be more precise and more aligned with what their actual impervious area is. So sometimes they'll pay less, sometimes they'll pay more. Overall, they'll pay more.
So the the column on the left is just dollar value.
Column on the left.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep.
Dollar charge.
Yep. So there's basically 551 properties that would see an increase in their bill between $0 and $200. There's 35 that would see an increase in their bill from $200 to $400, and then all the way up. And there's some that see, there's 11 properties that would see over $2,000 increase per quarter in their bill in this change.
And those must be the really big properties.
Yeah, because if you think about it, you're essentially capping how much somebody is currently charged.
Currently.
Correct.
I see you have some examples.
Yeah, so this is just looking at each of the classes. So these types are from the billing system. So this is how they're coded in your stormwater billing system. This is the total amount of revenue per quarter for each of these customer types using the fiscal year 26 rates, not changing the structure. And then the next column over shows if you do change the structure. And then you can see the total for that class of customers quarterly change. So if we take churches, for example, they're showing it's basically flat, but there are churches that see reductions and there's churches that see increases. Other businesses, that's the one that sees a lot of increase, and that's one of your biggest parcels. The Naval Academy Stadium has a lot of impervious area on it, so that one would see a rather large increase.
And these are totals for the entire,
Correct.
not year, but group.
Yep. All right. So now we're going
May I-
to, yes.
I'm sorry.
Sure.
Why does the counties go down in retail?
That's as a class. So we could dive into the individual details. I think the county shows up.
Well, there are a few others too. That one
yeah.
kind of stuck out. But
Right.
hotels, motels, another one. Pretty significant reduction.
Yeah. And that's really just a result of how they're falling into the tier. So if they're currently, not at the middle point of the tier, essentially they're getting penalized because they're paying for more impervious than they have. So once it goes to the actual measurement, that would be why.
But even within these uses or classes, I mean, some people will pay more and some will pay less. This is just the average. It's just sort of to demonstrate that it is more equitable in a way, but it's not geared towards a specific type of property use.
And you said these are all average.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. So the other topic we want to talk about is the credit program. And so what we're proposing is that at the same time you make this fee structure change, you roll out a credit program. And that credit program would really be designed to incentivize stormwater management on site, encouraging folks to create new stormwater practices, participate in education, outreach, things of that sort. We also are considering some new financial hardship for non-commercial, non-residential ratepayers. So if you're a nonprofit or a religious institution, could have potentially a credit for that as well. And we'll dive into those details here. Before I turn it over to Ann, just some considerations in terms of a credit program are the items listed here. So first off is who's eligible, what types of properties, what types of use, should there be a hardship waiver or other exemptions. Once you determine eligibility, we look at what do you need to do to qualify. So what is a qualifying best management practice? Can it be on-site and off-site or just on-site? Can it be activities-based? Do you have to maintain those facilities? Is there some threshold for qualification? Things of that sort. And then ultimately, what level of credit is provided? So how much of a discount is given for each different type of activity? And then most credit programs have some type of maximum. Even if you're managing all the stormwater on your property, you're still benefiting from stormwater management throughout the city. And so most communities have some type of cap. I think in the state, the maximum is 50%. Yeah. So the assumed maximum would be 50% credit. And we do see a lot of communities generally, based on my experience, once they put in a credit program, the participation isn't what they want it to be. And so oftentimes credit programs do evolve over time to try to get more and more participation. So with that, I'll turn it over to Ann.
So we took a look at a bunch of different credit programs, and we have lots of familiarity with them for various reasons. But I wanted to share just some examples of local jurisdictions and also some larger and more interesting jurisdictions. But just starting with the county, because that's usually our baseline place to start. They have a pretty involved credit program that includes tax credits and reductions to fees. And they have really just a whole lot of property use exemptions for different types of users. And it's pretty complex. One of the things that they do have that I thought was interesting and potentially applicable to us is they have a credit for DNR, which is the Department of Natural Resources, Clean Marina program pledgers. So marinas that are part of this program with DNR to keep their discharges clean. I think that's a pretty interesting program. I don't know that we're necessarily going to propose introducing that in the first year of rollout, because the last two slides just said credit programs can evolve. And in truth, we actually have a credit program already. It's just not being used. There are 3 non-residential ratepayers that are currently receiving a credit. So our main goal in this first rollout is to keep things simple, as simple really as possible. But we looked at all these other examples. So that's a highlight of the county. Baltimore City's has even more carve-outs, some other interesting exceptions like small green spaces to incentivize sort of pocket parks or limited development, small areas that's very urban oriented, which is pretty interesting. Prince George's County has a great alternative compliance program, so outreach and education, green housekeeping, they actually have an easement program. So we actually looked at that pretty heavily for our alternative compliance proposal. And then Portland was one that we looked at that it's comparable in size at least, but it's a different place. They're unique because they have credits that address quality and quantity specifically in a fairly convoluted mathematical way, which if you're a geeky engineer is exciting, but if you're trying to increase participation in this program is maybe not the way to go, but it's neat. Philadelphia also has tons of incentives, and they actually will purchase BMPs because these larger municipalities that are more urbanized, they're desperate to get the credits for stormwater management, and they're really making a big effort. I don't think we're at that point yet, but it's something to keep in the toolbox moving forward. And then Alexandria is another interesting example out of Maryland, well, so is Philadelphia, but that has a credit for stormwater facilities, which is your sort of standard, but they also have a credit for landscaping practices. And the thing that is really interesting is they have a credit for dry flood-proofing practices. This is for their residential program, but for protective barriers on basements and ways to limit damage to buildings, which is sort of outside of the world of stormwater management in a sense, but it's sort of for the greater public good. It's interesting. So those are some of the examples we looked at. Based on our research and experience, the recommendations we're making at this time for rolling out this initial program, again, it's actually a replacement of an existing program that's just not functioning, is to focus on non-residential for this year, to provide an alternative compliance path for religious and other 501c organizations, and a hardship waiver. The hardship waiver is actually something that is in the 2007 Stormwater Management Act, that you have to provide something. And so our qualifying activities that we're recommending for credit would be state approved on-site stormwater best management practices that have a city maintenance agreement. That maintenance agreement might exist, or we might need to create a new one, but that would be part of the deal. The threshold would be for new or redevelopment or retrofits that those practices meet or exceed state design guidelines. For existing practices, we have a triannual inspection process for BMPs, and they get a passing or a need maintenance or failing status. So in order for them to receive credit under this program, they would need to have a passing status. We're also recommending this alternative compliance path, largely tailored around the PG County, but making it Annapolis specific, which would include outreach and education pledges and pledges for green care and good housekeeping. So that would be only for religious and 501c eligible people. And it would increase their opportunity to engage and participate, even if they don't have the funds to build expensive practices, because really they are quite expensive to install. Future considerations, I'm not proposing it right now, but I would like to continue to understand this Green Marina program and think about incorporating that in the future. And as I mentioned, keeping it in the toolbox that we could look at city easements or purchase as a possibility in the future, as well as potentially zoning allowances. As mentioned, 50% is the maximum credit that we're allowed by law, but we could provide this alternate compliance path, and we could provide a hardship waiver, which would be 100%. And because of our triannual inspection cycle, we're proposing that the practice-based ones be on that 3-year renewable cycle. This is honestly just a repeat of what I just said with some more detail, so I don't know how much in the weeds you want to get. But the stormwater practices is up to 50% maximum allowable, alternative compliance up to 50%. Some things that are kind of interesting in the alternative compliance are opportunities for tree planting events or cleanup events. So they would pledge to do these things, and then we would require them to do annual reporting. And we can actually use that reporting towards our MS4 compliance for outreach and education as well.
That's for option B.
That's option B, yeah. And option C is just a straightforward hardship waiver. So looking at our previous example of the size of this property, I added this delightful pond here. So you can understand how the calculation would work. And again, I'm just going to emphasize, we could get really geeky engineering and turn this into a whole bunch of volume things, but we're proposing not doing that. We're going to try to keep it simple for now. So the calculation would be based on the percentage of impervious area treated by whatever practices exist. The slightly geeky thing is the treatment value, which is if it's managing the first inch or more of runoff, which is the first flush, the highest pollutant load, it gets a 1. If it's not and that's state standard, but if it's not meeting that, they would get dinged. It would be prorated for what it's meaning. And then times the maximum credit available for that particular practice, which we have generally just proposed as 50%. So in this example, this pond is treating 60% of the total impervious cover. It's eligible for 50% maximum credit. It's treating an inch or more. So it gets an overall 30% credit. So the final fee for this property owner would be 70%. of the fee, the new fee structure.
All right. So using that framework, what we did was went in and looked at all the non-residential parcels that currently have BMPs and just assumed if they all participated and all got 50% credits, how much would that reduce our revenues? So if you remember before, the current structure from non-residential is going to generate about $1 million. We go up to 1.4 million with the new structure. With the parcels that currently have BMPs, assuming they got 50% credit, it would reduce it down to about 1.2 million. So there's still a net increase in revenue anticipated, and this is assuming they all participate and they all get the 50% credit.
This is all properties with existing facilities.
Correct. Yep.
You're assuming they took credit. Okay.
Yep.
But based on the example that we just had, that would be the maximum. I mean, that example only got to 30% credit. It's unlikely that a lot of existing properties are treating 100% of their impervious area.
A lot of them aren't going to be up to maintenance.
Yeah, but
requirements.
over time, hopefully we get to incentivize them.
Do you want to take this one?
Yeah, so there's a whole bunch of administrative stuff we need to do to get this done. We've talked about going in for an amendment for the rate change, the rate structure change. I don't really technically think we need any sort of amendment for the credit program because we do have an existing credit program and the code language is pretty vague. So I think we're kind of okay there. But the biggest part of this is really trying to drum up participation. So the outreach is the really big part. Once we get the thumbs up to move forward, we want to be putting together a website. We want to be doing a mailer and a flyer and social media, but also direct one-on-one outreach, particularly with those larger property owners that are going to be impacted. And we aren't going to be able to do everything all at once. So we have a list of things that we're looking at in the future. So setting up, they're good examples of web viewers where you can see what your impervious area is and calculate your potential credit. And one thing I will say is this, Dave alluded to it, this will open up appeals as a potential risk, right? So some people will come back and appeal this. So while, if the tier structure kind of gives us some padding from that because they're in a range, but if we're saying, you have this exact amount of impervious area, some people are going to appeal it. So we have to be prepared for that. And of course, this is also just going to change the billing process itself. There's some back stuff that has to happen for that.
All right. So our final slide is just, again, the schedule that we're working towards. And just want to emphasize what's being proposed is that the current fee structure, so with the 15%, goes in place July 1. And that structure would stay in place for residential and non-residential through the remainder of the calendar year. At which time, though, during that period of time, non-residential parcels would have the ability to apply for credits in anticipation of the fee structure actually changing on January 1st to get that in place. So that would give them time to not be hit by the additional fees potentially, but also address the credits over that period of time. And that's all we had. Happy to take any questions.
What do we need to do legislatively to adopt this?
Well, it sounds like nothing legislatively except the budget is going to be the question, right?
Yeah, it's getting it through finance. So
Well, actually, no, that's wrong because the budget's going to adopt the 15% with the current model, but you're saying around.
Well, so we were going to go back to finance.
We'd have to adopt the new fee schedule.
with the new fee structure. Yeah.
Yeah.
We'd have to do mid-year.
That's the fee schedule, but what about the credit program?
So
That's
as I
already-
mentioned, because we actually have an existing credit program and there's some language in the code that's pretty vague, I don't think that there's anything legally that we need to do. But from a responsibility side, the outreach is a big part of this effort.
Seems too easy.
I know. It's not. It's really
Well,
hard.
the only tricky part, we'd have to adopt a new fee schedule. So the tricky part is going to be, it looks like you're proposing to do that in, gosh, I'm not clear. When would you be?
So we're proposing to go back to
January.
finance before July. So
There's
there's
June 4th.
a June 4th meeting that we're proposing going back to propose the new rate structure.
To go back to finance committee, you're saying?
Yeah.
To come back to us.
In July
And on June 4th
with what?
with the new rate structure.
So would that, so are you proposing to have this take effect with the beginning
So
of the new fiscal year?
We're proposing that it sort of takes effect, but we waive it for the first 3 months while people are able to submit applications and review them for the credit program.
Can I propose an alternative? It might be a little easier.
I'm just trying to think. We didn't make any, I mean, in essence, we accepted the recommendation from your last presentation. That's what we were just talking about because we're working on the final report. And we didn't make any, we talked about it, but, and even this morning, but we weren't making any changes. So you're coming back to us to,
Yeah, I think from my understanding, based on what the finance director or the former finance director said at the last meeting was for fiscal year 26, you essentially are adopting the 15%, and that's the anticipated revenues you're going to have on the system. I think she recommended that we could come back with an amendment that would change the fee structure, but we wouldn't change the anticipated amount of revenue because we don't know how much credits are going to be given away and how much additional revenue you get from the fee structure change. And so I believe the amendment would just say, okay, this is the fee structure. There's going to be a 6-month period before it goes into effect. But revenues on the system from a budgetary perspective would be just assuming the 15%.
Yeah, and
We may need
the
to
only
get
changes we're
clarification.
really proposing today are not changes. It's just an update on developing of the credit program, which we have.
I'm
Which we
just
have
wondering,
done.
I know finance, I don't know if this makes sense for finance, but it just seems like it might make sense just to, because it sounds like you're saying, like, we're, at this point, we're moving forward with currently proposed in the budget, which is the 15% increase. Well, then you're saying, no, but in June, you're going to come with an amended fee schedule to adopt these changes. But there's going to be a waiver, so they're not going to take effect until the new year anyway. My alternate would be, it seems like it'd be easier just to, we'll adopt the current, like we're planning, no change in this budget, 15% increase, and then January 1st with the new council, just, well, that might be confusing too. But so with the new council, just adopt the updated fee schedule.
I
But
think
could spin
I
with
think
new
the
council,
idea
that
is
might
to
get
give
confusing.
give them
Sorry?
time. I think the idea is to give them time before the fee goes into place, a warning to apply, and for us to have 90 days to respond to
So
their
they'll have-
applications.
Who's
I see your point,
administering?
okay.
Who's administering the
Because some
credit
of the
program?
properties will be
Is that done in
impacted
finance,
quite a
or-
bit.
Sorry?
Some of the properties will be impacted quite a bit. So we
Yeah,
don't just
no, I
wanna-
see your point. This way
Yeah.
they get a heads up.
It's like it's a rollout
Yeah.
period.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, because there's stuff down here in the bottom about you publicize the plan and there's outreach. Who's doing? I don't know who's DPW is doing it because it's in blue.
That's right.
And are you calculating the credits to turn over to finance so they know what they're supposed to be collecting?
We're working with finance. Back and forth. to
Does finance know
understand.
this?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
We're working closely with finance.
Surprise.
No, not at all.
Because water bills are sometimes contentious in finance. So
Yeah, we're working hand in hand with them.
If we don't have to do legislation,
Well, we don't at this point. We'll just have the fee. We'll remember. We'll have to explain it to everybody when we get the fee. All right. Are there any other questions about this? I have a few, but are there anything else from the committee?
no?
There's just a few points. Would you need any additional resources? Talking about for next fiscal year. Thinking ahead. Do you need any additional resources to shift to a multi-tier system for residential that we need to try to get funded for this? Or do you already have that information in GIS and whatever else you're using? Because if you need additional resources, they can get it. We can try to get it added to one-time use.
I don't think that we would need any specific resources. It's just acknowledging that it's a lot more properties. And so the volume of change will be larger, the risk of appeals and
I know, but it's
applications and
going to be
whatnot.
appeals from
So
people with big houses. But again, I think we need to. Anyway. I'm probably going to pursue it because I want to. My goal is to make this more equitable.
right.
Right.
Well, the one thing I would say is if we are successful in increasing participation in the credit program, then that will be a staff burden. Not a burden, but that will
Right. Yeah, and that's
yeah,
we
there's
definitely
an
need to know
implication on
about.
staff.
Yeah, that's a good point. Well, it won't get again. It won't happen till next fiscal year, if at all. But again, that's a good point, though. Even if we do that, the property owners with the big houses still participate. By that time, maybe we'll have a credit program we can roll out for them. To just keep that in the back.
They
of their
already
head.
have a credit program.
They do.
They do.
And what? I think you've answered. Oh, just one other thing. You mentioned trees as one of the alternative credits, and thank you. Along those lines, suggest we're working something in related as far as parking spaces, because again, one of my goals is to figure out a way to incentivize. I like pick on my ward, the Giant, incentivize them to potentially remove a few parking spots here and there to put trees, right?
Yeah. So impervious removal is an accepted
Oh, it is.
practice.
Okay. Oh, cool. Okay, great. Perfect. Well, at least from my standpoint, I want to really commend you on a very detailed, excellent presentation and just think this very excellent programmatic rollout. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Now we have one other item on the agenda, right, Ms. Jackson? We have one item left, I think,
Oh,
Some
yes.
essays.
which should take. Oh wait, we do another essay?
Stay for a minute.
What? We don't have an essay.
I was asking him if he could take.
I was asking Kayla. Oh, okay.
Okay. Well, I'll come over to you. How's that?
So
Well,
what-
right here.
we have a quick item on 0125, expansion of childcare options. But really, I know you two have dealt with that in committee. I don't have anything to add.
We approved. Final.
Well, do you want to make a motion? All those in favor of a favorable recommendation, please say aye. Aye. Thank you. And that concludes the agenda, I believe, Ms. Jackson, right? Motion to adjourn. I'll second that. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody.